How's it going, guys? Back again with another edition of the Athletes Hub. Today's a bit different. Today we're going to be talking about the WWE. So all you WWE fans out there, this is a great conversation for you guys to tune into. And joining me today is my good buddy Kieran. How's it going, bro?
I'm good, bro. You good?
Yeah, all good, man. All good. Thanks for jumping on this one. I know that we've spoken a lot about the state of the current WWE product, but today is all about John Cena. So as you fans will know, this is John Cena's final run in the company. And his final match takes place on December the 13th and Saturday night's main event. Currently, there's a tournament taking place to determine who his opponent will be as he bows out of the company after 25 years. Kieran, I know we've spoken a lot about this in the past, and I know you've got a lot to say about John Cena and his legacy in wrestling. But what's your thoughts on his career overall in terms of what he's brought to the product? I genuinely feel, I don't think it's the greatest of all time. I know we'll get to that at the end, but I feel like he's definitely been the face of the company and been an integral part of the WWE's journey in the last 20 years. So what's your thoughts on his sort of career overall as he looks to end it?
I think he's definitely made his mark. And there's no denying that at one time or another, he was definitely the face of the company. And probably at a time when they were most desperate because they weren't blessed with stars at that time. We're talking from like, let's say around 2007 to like 12. Definitely those years were quite a downtime for WWE in terms of viewership, gate receipt. Look, I'm not his biggest fan. I definitely think he's a legend. I think he's a legend. I have to be honest though, I don't think he's got this incredible legacy that the WWE are trying to sell to us. They even gone as far as to like put the little bar under his name when he comes out. GOAT, the great, and Michael Cole keeps calling him the greatest of all time, which is very forced because I've never ever heard anyone outside of the actual WWE production call him that.
But when you say that though, do you feel like obviously the WWE again it's probably a branding thing, right? It's his last run, they want to sell merchandise, etc., etc. But when you look at what he's given the company over the last 20 years, and I know again we've spoken about this away from the podcast, but is there not a case for, I'm not saying he's the greatest of all time, but is there not a case for him to be, I guess, considered as that after his accolades, what he's achieved in wrestling? He's 17-time world champion, he's a tag team champion, a US champion, intercontinental champion recently, beating Dominic Mysterio. He's pretty much done everything there is to do in wrestling. So if they do say that, is there not, I guess, is that not arguable, I suppose? Is that not the case?
Not in my opinion, but I guess, when immediately in any sport or in anything in life, when somebody calls someone the GOAT of a particular industry, before I even start assessing that individual, I think about who are we comparing them to. And when I think of the people that I grew up watching, so I started watching wrestling in 1998. Stone Cold Steve Austin, Shawn Michaels, The Undertaker, The Rock, just to name a couple. And when you flip the channel in the UK, WCW used to come on Channel 5.
Yeah.
We'd see people like Hulk Hogan, Kevin Nash, Randy Savage, Ric Flair, all of these guys. Even Goldberg as well was super hot at that time. I cannot have him in that conversation. Now,
why is that? Is that because of his in-ring work? Is it because of the character itself? Like, what is it? Because his ability to draw? Why would you say that he's not on that same level as those other superstars you've mentioned?
Because I feel like every guy I mentioned, they were. See, this is gonna sound controversial. But I feel like those guys, they almost got over organically. And they had to really, they were in wrestling in a time when things weren't just really given to you, or you weren't just taking a chance on. The promoter wouldn't take a chance on you. You had to really fight to get to the top. You know, we know about Stone Cold Steve Austin. He was in WCW, was fired from WCW. He was told he was never going to be a star, went to ECW. And even then, Vince didn't want to bring him in. And it was Bret Hart who really like petitioned, bring this guy in, bring this guy in. And when he first got there, they weren't really sure what to do with him. And we saw how he rose through the ranks slowly. Cena was pretty much a top guy within 2 years of being there. You know, that doesn't really happen. There are like, you can count on one hand in the last 100 years how many guys have made it from the bottom to the top in 2 years. And I feel like he made it to the top at a time when they were desperate. Brock Lesnar at that time was the top guy, but he was, you know, in his head thinking, do I want to really stay here? I don't really think I love this thing the way that, you know, I did in the beginning. Brock was only there for 2 years in his first run. And then he'd walked out. Stone Cold had retired a year earlier. The Rock, the same year that Brock walked out, he's gone to Hollywood. So now Vince McMahon's looking around and he's thinking, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? Okay, I've got this kid here. He's got a bit of charisma. I'm going to throw him in the deep end. Let's see how he does. And look, he made it work. I personally think Cena is very limited in his skill set.
You know, it's funny you say that, limited in skill set. And before I jump on to my next point, I remember Vince McMahon talking on Stone Cold's podcast years ago and saying that John Cena was the only, I guess, individual in that group at the time, in the ruthless aggression era, that grasped the brass ring and really took it and ran with it, right? And you mentioned about him being quite limited, but people would argue that Hulk Hogan was limited as well in his skill set. But again, charisma was what was probably his biggest asset, I suppose, right? So I guess when you're a WWE superstar, because again, I've spoken to you before, and I've always enjoyed the in-ring work of superstars, not necessarily the character and stuff like that. But in WWE, it's really your character that gets you over and gets you popular, not as opposed to your skill set. Stone Cold was quite limited towards the end of his career in his skill set, but he was an amazing character and everyone loved him, and that's what got him over in the end, right?
But Stone Cold was working with a broken neck for the majority of his like top level run. So there's a reason why. If you go back to 1996, 97, prior to Owen Hart almost killing him, you can see he was actually quite a technical wrestler. He only turned into that like brawler style of wrestler when that's all he could do, you know, because he couldn't really get around as much. And ultimately, that's what ended his career prematurely. When I say limited, what I mean, a lot of people have criticized his in-ring work. I actually think his in-ring work is pretty good. I'm not one of these guys that need to see him do shooting star press or, you know, all these kind of like fancy moves to be considered a top guy. No. I just never felt any real intrigue in his character or in his storytelling to the point where I was like, do you know what? This is the guy. Like, and I never as well, any guy that was like on top. So The Rock, super charismatic. The Undertaker, he had that kind of darkish, like horror movie style theme. Kane as well in the Attitude Era. Stone Cold, you know, again, he had super charisma and he was able to tell different stories. You know, it wasn't just every week he's coming out and giving people stunners. No, if you go back and you watch, he actually told intriguing stories with not just Vince McMahon, but with Shawn Michaels, with The Undertaker, with Bret Hart. I mean, to this day, people still talk about the promo with the story with Bret Hart.
Mm.
With John Cena, and I think history will support what I'm saying when I say he was limited. When people talk about Cena's career in 5 years' time, in 10 years' time, and even now today, as he's coming towards the end of his run, we more so talk about the opponents he had and their roles that they played in his stories rather than him.
Mm.
And I think that's a cause for concern, you know, because people are more interested to see the other guy.
You see, you say that, but if you look at some of the examples you gave, like for example, Stone Cold and his feud with Bret Hart in 96, 97, right?
Yeah.
People would argue and say that without, Bret Hart, wouldn't it be a Stone Cold in there? Because he essentially took him to another place. Because I know Stone Cold had, again, WCW was a great worker in WCW, came to WWE, was the ringmaster. But that night, Survivor Series 96, with that feud with Bret Hart leading into WrestleMania 13 with, that infamous match, right, with Bret Hart, that kind of really solidifies Stone Cold as a character as well.
Yeah, I would agree with that. But what I would say is, and this is the difference between the two examples, when Austin was feuding with Bret was the top guy, and it was Bret's job to get Cena over.
Mm.
When Cena was feuding with all these famous feuds, right? Bar the one with Kurt Angle, which is, when he was in the infancy of his WWE career, all those feuds, Cena was the top guy, and his job was to create a story. He was the top guy, so he's going to come out on top. He's the super baby face. But did he ever really enhance any of those guys' careers? I don't know if he did, to be honest.
Mm.
And unlike any of the other guys I mentioned at the beginning of this podcast, Cena didn't really help to make anyone else. He didn't. And there are stories. I won't get into the details, but people like Alex Riley, people like Wade Barrett, and their stories have been corroborated by legends themselves who were in the room when these decisions were being made, where Cena has just point blank refused to put people over, young guys who are on the come up, and people would say straight away, yeah, but Cena is the big star. Why would he be putting over this guy and this guy? Well,
do you know what, Kieran? I'm going to throw something at you now. Yeah, this is going to. I know you'll have an answer for this, right?
Mm-hmm.
I remember Stone Cold in 2002 refusing to put over Brock Lesnar. That was a one-off match, and he come out and said that there was no storyline and there was no reason for him to put him over because it didn't make sense. And he walked out of the company. Obviously, he was brought back, but Stone Cold's a top guy, Brock upcoming young guy. Didn't put him over for various reasons. So there's history, and there's even talk about Hulk Hogan infamously refusing to put other guys over in his heyday. So we've had stories of legends, large in life. Arguably, those two I've mentioned, Austin and Hogan, being on the Mount Rushmore, refusing to put over talent, right? So it's not just John Cena, I guess, because of his leverage in a company, would use that to his advantage, right? But it's not just John Cena, I guess, refusing to put over young talent.
Well, what I would say, again, is there is context here. The context being, as I was getting to, when Cena refused to put over people like Wade Barrett, for example, and the Nexus, the storyline was there. You're trying to build these young guys up and create more stars. And even Edge and Chris Jericho have publicly said, in the years after that, they said to John, look, like, you got to put these guys over. And Cena just kind of shrugged his shoulders and walked away. He didn't put them over, but the story was there to put them over. With Stone Cold Steve Austin, I've always criticized Austin and said that you didn't just turn your back on Vince McMahon, you turn your back on the fans. And I don't support that. But the thing is, there was no story. There was no build. Stone Cold Steve Austin at that time, I think to this day, was the most bankable WWE superstar of all time. He had the biggest gate receipt, sold the most merch. So to have a legend like that and then try to have him do the job, which is a wrestling term for those of you who don't know, which means he's going to lose. Without any build, any story, you just advertise it, over the weekend. They didn't even advertise it a week in advance. Like, so the previous Raw, it wasn't advertised. So he called Jim Ross, JR, and he said, "What is that? Is that it?" And then JR's like, "Yeah, Steve, that's it." So he said, "Okay, tell Vince I'm not coming," and that was it. Yeah. Now he was wrong. He should have tried to work something out. However, there is a context there. So I think, yeah, Austin's culpable, but there were also other people to blame. Whereas John Cena, he was selfish in that moment, and he killed the momentum of the story and of those guys. And it's not the John Cena show. And I think, people might say, "Oh, you're just a hater," but that decision back then in 2010 or 11, has had an impact up to now, because up to now, the WWE are still trying to find these new stars. And I believe one of the reasons they've given Cena this ceremonial send-off storyline, aside from the fact that he's been a great ambassador for WWE, and he is a legend, despite what anyone might say, he is a legend. The reason primarily why they've done this is because Cena is a bankable star. And right now, the WWE are struggling to drum up interest outside of the WWE world. There isn't that star that transcends the WWE universe and draws mainstream attention.
Yeah.
They're trying really, really, really hard to position Cody Rhodes like that. And no hate to Cody Rhodes. Cody Rhodes just isn't that guy. He isn't gonna. He just doesn't have it. So Cena, especially with now his Hollywood career, they're like, okay, The Rock's not around. This is the next best thing. Let's get Cena in. Let's do the run. And even look, they called The Rock to come and show support. This is from The Rock directly in February when they set up the heel turn for John Cena. Well, it was actually, if we're to believe what The Rock says, it was The Rock's idea, because they were struggling to drum up interest, even with Cena there. So it showed.
It's a good point you mentioned. It's a good point. I mean, I think the reason why, before going to the next point, I think the reason why Vince in particular loved John Cena is because he was dependable, he's reliable, and I'm not in any way comparing the impact to what Hulk Hogan did in the 80s and early 90s, right? But John Cena was a guy for many years that Vince could rely on to turn up every single week, to do stuff outside of WWE. You talk about things like Make-A-Wish Foundation, and the product in the 80s was catered towards kids. There was a part in the 90s where Vince, the product was aimed at kids really, and that's probably the lowest point of the business. And John Cena, particularly after the business went PG in 2007 and 2008, the product was catered towards young people, and John Cena was probably the ideal person to represent the company in that time because he related to particularly young kids who loved him, make appearances outside of WWE. And I think Vince just wanted someone to take that role, not necessarily as a superstar, but as you mentioned before, as an ambassador, somebody who could represent the company in a great light. Because when you meet John Cena, I'm assuming that he's someone that everyone will like, and he's a likable guy, and he's charming, and kids love him, like loved Hulk Hogan and Ultimate Warrior, etc., etc. So I think that's probably the reason why the company look at him in such great stead, because he had that effect on people, not just in wrestling, but kids who met him outside of the ring. But what did you make of his heel turn? Because we spoke about his heel turn, this year, and being quite excited about what could happen. And again, we've not seen a heel John Cena. Maybe in his early stages, as when he was Doctor of Thugonomics, we saw a bit of that. But after all these years of him being a great babyface, which means a good guy in wrestling terms, this was a chance now to see him on his last run as a bad guy. And I don't feel like it lived up to expectations. I know The Rock, as you mentioned, was influential in promoting it and bringing interest into that. But I just didn't really feel like it lived up to expectations, to the point where a lot of fans were saying, well, interest just drummed down off that. I mean, what did you think of his heel turn?
I thought, like you, I thought it was a failure. I think it was a failure for a few different reasons. And this is where I'm going to actually defend John Cena now, because I think it's quite clear, based on what we've heard from The Rock, and a little bit of Cena himself, although he hasn't completely lifted the lid on how the conversations went. It's quite clear that they didn't have a plan for this run, this last run that he's had in its entirety. You know, the heel turn was like off the cuff decision that they made to try and create some shock value in the run and make it memorable, because up to that point it was kind of looking like the same old Cena routine. It was a failure. It was an abject failure. But
how can you have a plan? This is John Cena turning heel. You know, arguably that Elimination Chamber heel turn reminded me of the Hulk Hogan one in the '96 at Bash at the Beach. This is something that doesn't happen every day. So when you make that turn, there's got to be a long-term plan there. There has to be.
Yeah. Well, this is why it failed, because there wasn't a plan. And I think it was Hulk Hogan himself who was... or it may have been Eric Bischoff, who said that Hulk Hogan had told him after refusing a creative decision, it's okay to make a creative decision like this, but before you do it, you need to, you say, okay, what's next? Where do we go from here? And I think that maybe someone who was part of the creative process thought The Rock was kind of going to hold Cena's hand through this a little bit, but The Rock has publicly made it clear that was never the plan, and his plan after that was never to be involved, because he didn't, I don't know if this is really true, but he said he didn't want to take the spotlight off of Cena, which is fair enough. And then Cena himself has said, you know, he didn't really feel like himself during the run. He was getting cold feet numerous times.
Do you think it was a mistake? Do you think it was a mistake to turn heel? Because I look at some superstars and you're thinking, some superstars' heels turns just don't resonate. I look like someone like maybe Sting, right? One of the most popular superstars in wrestling history, not WWE, but just wrestling period. Turning Sting heel, I just don't think would resonate with people.
No. I think I don't think it was a mistake, because, you know, by the reaction that it got over social media, in the mainstream, it generated the interest they were looking for. So it worked in that sense. The mistakes came from Triple H and John Cena himself and whoever else was involved in the creative process, because they didn't have a plan. And you know, when you don't have a plan, you don't have a story, you can't just do it off the cuff. You mentioned that some guys that are like super babyface, it doesn't work for them. Well, it worked for Hulk Hogan, and I would say that Hollywood Hogan is one of the greatest heels of all time. I mean, you watch Hollywood Hogan in WCW, and you would never believe that he was this white meat babyface back in the 80s and the early 90s. You wouldn't believe it. And that's a testament to a man who knows how to play a character, a role. Whereas I think Cena...
Do you think that they missed a trick? Because you mentioned that the Hollywood Hogan thing, he had Scott Hall and Kevin Nash, and they were a great trio. Scott Hall and Nash had joined a few months before that, created that shock value that in wrestling at the time, I was a kid, so I wouldn't have watched it at the time, but it basically changed the business. You didn't see two top superstars jump from the WWF at the time to WCW, and them two alone doing that was shocking itself. And then for Hulk Hogan to join those two, two big personalities and them coming free, that whole faction itself, he had people to rely on as well, if that made sense. Whereas with John Cena, in that picture we can see here, he's got The Rock next to him. I know Travis Scott interfered, but maybe he might have missed that faction, having people alongside him to kind of help him become that heel. Because I remember, not even the night afterwards, but a few weeks later in Germany, he came out, John Cena, and he cut a promo. But I'm thinking, if you're going to make this heel turn, you've got to do this on Raw the next night. You've got to keep it going, keep it fresh. And they waited a few weeks I think by that time it went flat, I feel. And I feel like him not having The Rock next to him to cut a promo about why he turned heel, I think they missed a massive trick there.
Well, you're 100% right. Having someone or a group next to him would have helped him exponentially. I mean, The Rock said that the plan was never to, be with him, but that would have creatively made the most, made the most sense, and it would have been the best story. It would have created the most interest, the most intrigue, and The Rock had said thereafter, there was no plan for him to wrestle again. He didn't necessarily need to, because now Cena is there. But yeah, all in all, the heel turn was a abject failure. I mean, to be frank, it was a shit show. And I feel for Cena because with Vince McMahon there, this kind of story would have been carefully thought out, written out, and rehearsed months in advance. But they got desperate. And
that's what I'm saying though. WWE, like we saw it, I think was it last year where we had that, that infamous sort of angle between Seth Rollins, Cody Rhodes, The Rock, and Roman Reigns. And I think the plan was for The Rock to face Roman Reigns at WrestleMania, and then they saw the backlash, particularly online, and they changed it, right? And that was brilliant. Improvisation was brilliant because it went on to a few more weeks and a few more months of great storytelling leading up to WrestleMania that year. But I'm just baffled about how they could get somebody who's been in the company for so long, such a great babyface, and then to not have a plan behind it, and for The Rock to be integral in the promotion of this and in the heel turn itself, and then to not feature again. For me, that was a very, very strange decision. But we'll talk about WWE and the current product in another show. But I'm just curious, what's your favorite version of John Cena? Like, what's your favorite version? Because when I think of John Cena, when I first really began to think, okay, this is the guy, I remember him beating Big Show at WrestleMania 20 for the US Championship, and then a year later beating JBL for the WWE Championship. And that summer of 2005, I feel like that's when he really kind of came into his own and became the face of the company, really, had the iconic spinner belt, and went on to have great feuds with Kurt Angle. And I think probably the feud that stands out to me is the one with Edge throughout 2006. I thought that was a great feud. What version of John Cena was your favorite, if you've got a favorite?
Well, just before I get to that, I just wanted to make one last point on what we were talking about, which is that Triple H said something very interesting several weeks ago. Cena lost a match, and he said, so he was asked the question, what was the thought process behind this? And he said, well, the reality is John's not going to be here for much longer. So we have to, start putting the younger guys over and building them up. And it just kind of made me think maybe there is a push and pull scenario behind the scenes with regards to this run. Maybe Triple H was not 100% behind it, but TKO, wanting to drum up business and general interest in the product, were like, we got to push it, but we'll never know.
Out of interest, did you watch WWE Unreal on Netflix?
No,
okay.
I would never.
That would give you your answer as to whether Triple H was behind it or not. It probably wasn't his idea, but according to the documentary itself, everybody, once they heard the idea, everyone was like, yeah, it's got to happen.
Okay.
Oh, we'll talk about another episode though.
Yeah.
back to John Cena's versions. Which one for you stands out?
None.
Oh,
No
no.
version stands out, and that's why I'm so against this idea that Cena is like this modern day Hulk Hogan. He didn't captivate the audience the way that WWE are trying to sell me. I was actually there. I was at the shows, or I was watching at home. I was paying. In the UK, we had this thing back in the days called Sky Box Office.
Yep.
So you had to pay £20 to watch a pay-per-view, and I was every month, at the end of the month, I'm £20 is coming either out of my pocket money, or when I got a job, it's coming there. But either way, that £20 was going to my parents, and I was watching. So I was watching for all the way back in the 2000s, and I never liked John Cena. I never thought, oh my God, like this is so cool. And bear in mind, I'm still a young fan at that time. So I'm not thinking about the way that fans look at the business now, almost like as a fantasy booker. I'm still watching as a fan at that time. Yeah. And I'm still like, I wasn't really feeling him the way I was feeling someone like Batista, or before him, Brock Lesnar, so I can't.
Sorry, is there any like feud that stands out at all, or you just like none of his feuds, none of his promo work, none of his?
Yeah, the feud that stands out for me is his first feud with The Rock in 2011, which culminated in their match at WrestleMania 28 in Miami. And it stands out because at that point, I was so done with Cena. I was just like, please, anyone, just come and replace him as the top guy. The Rock comes back, and I was like, okay. And then with WrestleMania in Miami, everyone, back in the days, like at that time, we didn't have access to like dirt sheets really. So it was just a case of like hope. And everyone on Twitter was like, there's no way that Rocky's going to lose in Miami. And that's the only wrestling match I ever watched where my heart was literally in my mouth. I stayed up until, in the UK time, it was like 4 a.m. And I'm praying, please, 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 Rock, don't lose to this guy. And the Rock went over, he won. And then I had a different type of respect for John Cena, because I was like, do you know what? They had a real life animosity, and it would have been very easy for Cena to say, I'm not putting this guy over. This guy's essentially a part-timer. I've been busting my ass here for nearly 10 years. Why would I put this guy over?
But The Rock's a rock. The Rock's a rock's Kieran, man. You whether you're John Cena, you've been doing it for 20 years or not, The Rock was the guy who really changed the business and made it popular. Wrestling was good, and again, for a certain demographic in the 90s, but when, as you mentioned, 98 here, the demographic changed. It was because of The Rock and Stone Cold. They made wrestling cool. They made it popular. They're the ones who really made people like us want to become fans. So regardless of what John Cena did, again, Vince McMahon, again, he as much as The Rock is a part-timer, he would have been loyal to The Rock because The Rock helped him change the business. The Attitude Era changed WWE's fortunes. They won the war and went on to be the dominant company in America. So I think if John Cena would have refused to do the job to The Rock, I don't think that would have gone down well. I think Vince would have done something, as you mentioned, a screw job in '97. I'm not saying that would have taken place, but I don't think John would have had a choice in that, to be honest with you.
I don't know. See, the thing is,
I think Kieran, he wouldn't have a choice. The Rock is.
I think he would have, and the reason why is because, as I said, The Rock's gonna leave, and he can easily say, "Listen, hear me out. The Rock is gonna leave. He's gonna go back to Hollywood. I've already publicly said, I don't really want to do that. My love is here with you, with this company, and with these fans. So let's find another way." And I think that Vince would have possibly been open to that. But
how would you have felt, Kieran? You are talking about a fan from back in the day, growing up watching attitude era, becoming a fan because of that reason. And that feud would have brought back fans who no longer watch WWE, who would have come back just to see The Rock in that run against John Cena. And for those fans to come back and watch a guy who you don't believe in, who you look at and think, okay, this guy doesn't impress me, to beat your favorite, The Rock, how would have that? I don't know. How would the fans would have perceived it? How would it have gone down?
It wouldn't have gone down well at all. Because there are people that I'm friends with, and they weren't watching WWE from like the Cena years leading up to that, especially after The Rock left, Stone Cold's left. But they came back to watch for that. That story brought them back. And had The Rock lost, they would have just gone away again. They would have gone away again. But also, I would say that it's not like it wouldn't have made sense if he lost, because it would have almost been like this passing of the torch moment, because I had not really expected The Rock to be there for any period of time afterwards anyway. I mean, he ended up having a run with the WWE title the following January, leading into the next WrestleMania. But nobody expected that. We thought he was coming in, quick payday, and almost like a little... Because at that time, The Rock's Hollywood career was really taking off now. He's just been cast in Fast and Furious 5. He's got the G.I. Joe sequel. He was doing a lot, and he was becoming this like modern day action star in Hollywood. So he could have easily just gone away, and it would have hurt us. But so from a business side, I would have understood as well. This is a passing of the torch. Cena's the guy that's going to stay here.
Yeah.
But that
makes sense, man. I mean, I guess to finish off here, I know we mentioned at the start of the show, John Cena's last match will take place on December the 13th at Saturday night's main event. There's currently a tournament that's going to determine his final opponent. When you look at John Cena, I mean, firstly, who do you think his opponent will be if you had to make a prediction? And lastly, how would you determine, or how would you look at John Cena's legacy in wrestling as a whole? And I know you've mentioned he's not the GOAT, but how would you sort of look at his legacy and what he leaves behind?
I kind of feel like maybe Jey Uso will be the opponent. And I actually have a suspicion, I could be wrong, I have a suspicion that John Cena is actually going to lose.
Yeah.
Do the business on the way out, just as everybody else has done. Which I think is the right call, to be honest. There's nothing to be gained unless you're bringing back like one of his like legacy opponents. There's no reason for Cena to win from a booking standpoint. As a fan,
you think Zack Ryder would potentially be like a no? Okay. I mean, they have got history. They have got history back in 2011 where
they have got history, but I don't feel like it would. I don't feel like it would really do too much for. I mean, it might make Matt Cardona who is Zack Ryder. He might feel really good about it, but I don't think that the WWE are going to go down that route just simply because, well, he's not even a WWE wrestler. He works for a different company. Yeah. So yeah, I think Jey Uso, because I think they're still on this Jey Uso train, which I don't have a problem with, to be honest. Where they really want to position him as a future star, and in some ways he already is a star. He has his his little fan base. He has his catchphrase. The only thing he really needs to fix is his in-ring work, which can at times be sloppy. But yeah, I think either way, I will be watching Cena's last match. That's just the fan in me that wants to see it. It will
what do you think his legacy will be in wrestling, just to finish off?
I think his legacy, I mean, he's probably, well, not probably, he is the best of his generation. I think he probably stayed too long, if I'm being honest. if you look at the guys that we mentioned before and how long they stayed on top, they almost, and I think this is true for every industry, not just wrestling. When you're a top guy, you have a time when it's like, okay, it's time for the next guy. And I think Cena's the only guy who has been a top guy in the last 50 years who stayed too long. Now, people could argue that it was a necessity. Vince McMahon needed him to stay that long. But in that time, he didn't elevate anybody, in my opinion, and make them really like a top guy. And he never passed the torch properly. So, yeah, I mean, he's definitely not the greatest of all time. I don't think I would have him in my top 5. Maybe top 10 out of respect for his career, but that's it. Yeah. And then if we start breaking down like the skill set of the other 9 guys, he probably doesn't make it like close to them. But yeah, I do respect seeing his career and his longevity. But yeah, he's definitely not the greatest of all time, and he's nowhere close in my opinion.
Close. Nowhere close. That's a good way to wrap up the conversation. Kieran, it's been good to talk to you today, man. It's been good. I know you've been asking for this conversation for a long time to get all that off your chest, which you have done. But guys, again, thanks for watching. Keep up to date what we're doing. We have got another WWE chat coming up soon about the current state of the product, and I'm sure we're going to have a lot to talk about that as well. But as always, follow us on social media, TikTok, Instagram, and also X. Keep up to date what we're doing. And let us know in the comments, do you agree with our views on John Cena? Is he the greatest of all time to you? He's in your top 5. He's in your Mount Rushmore. Let us know in the comments down below. And until then, we'll catch you guys later on. Kieran, it's been great, bro.
Yep, I'll catch you later on, bro.
Take it easy.